Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Township of Mapleton Council meeting for Tuesday, October 8th. I'll call this meeting to order, and if you're able to stand, please rise for Row Canada. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, move on to confirmation of minutes. Moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Reid, that the minutes of the Township of Mapleton Council meeting held on September 24th, 2024 be confirmed as circulated in the agenda. All in favor? It's carried. We have no matters rising from the minutes. Moving on to number 7, delegations. And the first one up is our Junior and Fair Ambassador for 2024, Lauren Hennessy. Lauren, take to the microphone right there, push the little button and make the light go on. And you're going to tell us all about how great you've been as the Junior Ambassador and what you've been up to.
Good evening, council members, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thrilled to be here tonight, bringing greetings from the Drayton Mapleton Ag Society. I have been coming to the Drayton Fair every year for 13 years. I know we all missed the COVID year, but I still made the Harvest Festival. I didn't even miss the fair on the year that I had my baseball tournament, and in case you're wondering, we won that year. Because of how much I love the fair, I'm going to tell you why. I learned how to show a dairy calf at the Drayton Fair. I was about 4 years old, and my friend Kristen went in the ring with me just in case I needed help. But I did it all by myself. I'm a 4-H member now, and I show a Jersey calf. Her name is Eclipse. She and I were in the ring on Saturday at 12 at the fair. Something that not everyone knows about is the exhibit hall. And when people ask me what's in there, I'm more than happy to tell them. Cookies, jam, tallest sunflower, butter tarts, cupcakes, sewing, and so much more. The exhibitors put a lot of work into their entries, and they're so proud to show it off. Another thing I love about our Drayton Fair is the demo derby. These cars are driving fast, aggressive, loud, and entertaining. So those are my favorite parts of our Drayton Fair. So if you want something to do on the second weekend of August, come to the fair and I'll show you everything. Celebrating Roots, August 8th to 10th, 2025. Thank you. Thank you. This means a lot to me.
You're welcome, Lauren. So the council, we gave Lauren a certificate from the township. We're very proud of you, Lauren. We know the competition was very fierce. We have 5 girls, 5 young people that participated, and all did great speeches. I was there for the night for the speeches. Everybody did a great job. And you had an interview as well, I believe. And what else did you have to do? Lauren, go back up to the microphone. What else did you have to do to actually win the competition?
All I had to do was a speech and an interview.
Not all. And the board.
Oh yeah, and the me board.
And what was that about?
Me.
Just about you. So just all pictures of you, nobody else. You didn't have Elgin on there, nobody else?
I had to cut him out of a lot of pictures.
Oh, did you? We wouldn't want Elgin on your poster board, would we? Not
No.
a chance, okay. Council, do you have any questions or comments for Lauren?
Ask her questions, be prepared.
Okay, well then, go ahead, Councillor Reid.
More of a comment than a question. I just wanted to say congratulations on becoming the ambassador, but also to the Agricultural Society for bringing it back, because that's a huge thing for local fall fairs, to have a voice from some younger people. It's awesome. And I know you've been coming here for 13 years, and that's great. And just to know your 13th birthday was yesterday, so it's been your whole life. And I hope you look forward to the next year as the ambassador.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got two questions. So after you won the competition to be the junior ambassador, what did you do in the time leading up to, like, around the fair? And then what are your responsibilities, kind of, how long are you the junior ambassador? Is there another competition next year? So I'm just curious what you do and what you did during the fair.
So I went to a bunch of parades and a bunch of other competitions to watch. But, yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, I handed out a bunch of ribbons at like our fair. But yeah, I'm the junior ambassador until next year.
Do things in our community. Say that.
Yeah, I do things in our community.
And you're going to be in the Christmas parade?
Yep.
All right, so you got other things you still have to do.
Yep.
And anything else you got to do? Anything you need to be at? Not yet.
No. What? Oh yeah, because this is the first year we did the junior ambassador, so we're hoping to do the senior ambassador soon, maybe next year.
So you want to do junior and senior next year? You want to do both?
Yeah, senior.
Okay, that sounds great for our agricultural fair. Thank you so much. Anything else from council members? Councillor Ottens?
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, again, just to echo what the others have said, I was happy to see this come back and look forward to it turning into a full ambassador program again, because it's so important, as we see at the fair conventions, all these ambassadors representing their areas, and it would be nice if Mapleton was represented there as well. Just for those who don't know, can you explain if boys can also enter this? Because we did see 5 girls. I was at the competition as well, and it was, sometimes you can tell who's going to win, but in this case, everyone was so good, it was hard to tell. Like, there was lots of cream rising to the top, so you were the best of the best by far. But it was a stiff competition group, so boys can also do this?
So when I went to the Palmerston competition, there was a junior and a senior, and the junior, there was a guy in it, and the guy won. So, yeah.
Excellent. So does it matter, male or female, you can enter and be, and next year will be junior and senior,
Yeah.
hopefully. So that's what we're hoping for next year, junior and senior. All right.
Senior ambassadors go on to the CNE.
Yeah, like we're saying, once we have a senior, there's an age limit
Then,
there. So
right,
that's what we're hoping, keep promoting our fair at the provincial level.
perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lauren. I do have a resolution here, moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Ottens, that Township Mapleton Council receive for information a delegation of Lauren Hennessy, the Junior Fair Ambassador, regarding an overview of the responsibilities of the Junior Fair Ambassador, a summary of the activities by the Junior Fair Ambassador prior to, during, and since the Fall Fair, and other topics pertaining to the Agricultural Society. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you so much for coming. Now you can leave. Yeah. Go take Elgin to whatever he's got to go to now. All right, our next delegation is Mr. Earl Campbell, County Councillor, going to give us an update on Wellington County Council, what's happening. Earl, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Davidson. It's always a pleasure to come out to these. I always have a hard time holding my hands down because every time you call for vote, I want to participate. So anyway, so I thought what I'd do this time, It's been over a year, I think, since I've been here, so I just thought I would go through the last county council agenda. It was 477 pages. I've got it down to about 5. I have some quick notes and some other bits and tidbits about Mapleton as we go through it. So, County Council last month, we started out with Nigel Belchamber. Some of you may have heard that name before. Nigel did a legislative review, came up with 10 recommendations for County Council to go through. That'll be debated next month, and everything on there would appear to be okay and would be coming in 2025. So that's going to change how our report writing is done. County is going to move to video presentations of council meetings, possibly committee meetings, and it's right down to whether we close the door to a conference room or not. So recommendations are kind of over the map. We then moved on to the roads department. So roads department, a couple of local updates first. So Wellington Road 711, the traffic lights are in, and they are permanent for people that are asking. They will be there till the roundabout is put in, which is on the 10-year capital forecast, 28 or 29. I'd have to go back and double check, so it's out a few years. 2025, the roundabout is scheduled to go in at what we call the S-bands at 8 and 9. That's still on forecast. The Bosworth Bridge, weather depending, will be open in December and closed again for about a month next spring to finish the the expansion joints. So they've had some issues with that bridge, so it's a little bit delayed. But they do anticipate, barring any major weather issues, to have it open by the end of the year. Arthur Rhodes Garage, which is in North Wellington now, used to be former Mapleton Township, PO back in the day, is scheduled for completion this fall, October, November, so that should be up and servicing our roads for this winter. They approved 2 new roads graders for 2025, just shy of $1 million for 2 graders, but it's 28% below the retail price on those. That's part of the buying group that the county enjoys, and you guys enjoyed as well. Automated speed enforcement is proceeding. There'll be 4 locations in Mapleton: Wellington Road 8, Wellington Road 10, Wellington Road 86, and Wellington Road 11. And all 4 of those are adjacent to schools. So 2 of them are Mennonite schools, the other 2 are Maryborough Public and Drayton Senior. Polinair plantings, 2 new plantings are being done right now. One of them is just adjacent to Mapleton. If you're going out County Road 17 to Cumnock, corners at 9 there, the ditch has all been cleaned out. There's a pollinator patch going in there. The other one is on the McNair track, which is on Wellington Road 16 in Arthur area. There's also a couple of existing pollinators plantings located at Pushlands landfill and Riverston landfill. That's it for roads. So solid waste services has approved, and this was approved by county, a new $10 minimum fee at landfills. That'll come into effect January the 1st. That has created some controversy in the community, but that's the intent, to go forward to modify people's behavior to get them to use the curbside collection program that's currently available to them. The Elora transfer station, that was, Elora and Rothsay were in 2 months ago now. Both were significantly over budget, were rejected by county council. Elora has gone back out for tender again, but for construction next year. I think it's basically the same tender. There's not any significant changes that I'm aware of. And the Rothsay tender has been put on hold, and they're revisiting what they're going to do in Rothsay. So they're looking at scaling that down a little bit, not doing paving, not doing concrete work to try to keep that cost down, but to still facilitate the facility. We moved on to the OPP Detachment Board. So that's the new name for the Police Services Board as of April 1st of this year. We're under a new act. We're still waiting for the new provincial appointee. And we have a new stats package that's now common across the province. So historically, we've had a tailor-made Wellington County stats package that was agreed to by the board and the inspector. That's out the window. Now we have a package that every single OPP detachment board in the province will be using. So not to say we can't get some of those other stats if we request them from time to time, but there's now a standardized package, and that's part of what this new act's all about, is to get everybody on the same playing field. Next, we had Joint Health and Services Land Ambulance. This is new this year. Historically, we always had one member from City of Guelph and our standard 4 county councilors and the warden. This year, we've switched it up. There's now 4 members from Guelph, 4 members from Wellington County, including the warden, and the chairs are alternating every other year. So this is the first year of it, so far it's humming along fairly well, but we'll see how that comes out in the long run. 65 Dell High Street is a transitional housing for 32 people. That's scheduled for completion this fall. And tenders were awarded for 3 generators for daycare facilities, 1 in Guelph, 1 in Ferguson, 1 in Mount Forest. And that's just in addition to them, so that they're like you guys tonight. If the power goes out, they keep going. Next committee was Information, Heritage, and Seniors. Wellington Terrace has been approved for a new nurse practitioner, so that's a new full-time position in healthcare on-site. That should reduce doctor visits and hopefully hospital visits and take better care of the people we support at Wellington Terrace. Wellington County Museum had several new exhibits, one called Let's Party that opened this summer. It's already been closed though, so if you wanted to go to it, we're already past the best before date. Wellington County Archives, if you watched The Amazing Race, they were featured this summer, episode 6 on August the 12th. So they did a whole spiel on Center Wellington and included a search of microfiche, I think actually, sorry, is the proper term, at the archives. Excuse me. Pavilion is being redesigned. It's an ongoing project. There's one to be constructed adjacent to the new Indigenous Gardens, which are directly behind the daycare or directly behind the museum / the library. So if you're familiar with the site, that was put in 2 years ago, and this is an addition to that that's being worked on. And there was a new parking lot installed with 24 spaces to the east of the Aboyne Library, and that's being completed this month. Erin Library construction is proceeding and should complete in the summer of 2025, and that's an old grist mill that's being restored, so it should be quite the site. Planning and Land Division. Land Division doesn't report, they do their own thing, but under planning, we renewed a 5-year lease on the North Nursery at Luther Marsh. That's not an owned site by the county, so we lease it from GRCA with an agreement with the school board. So the school board's on the hook for part of it, the county's on the hook for part of it. The Green Legacy Program marks 20 years, or its 20th anniversary, I'm sorry, this year. To date, they've planted over 3 million trees in the county and providing educational and volunteer opportunities for, believe it or not, over 100,000 students in the 20 years. That's how many students they've put through those 2 facilities. They come in and they help to do the repotting and that type of thing. Also within the planning group is the Green Fleet Pilot. So the county's made a commitment to go green where it's all possible and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. At this point, they've identified 3 vehicles, 2 electric, 1 for IT and 1 for Green Legacy, and 1 hybrid for property services. There is another 33 vehicles on the list. A significant portion of those being the roads department, but the infrastructure / the vehicles themselves aren't there yet, so that's still coming in the future, but no commitments have been made, but there has been commitments made to these 3 vehicles to go electric. Also within that group, the official plan review, so the 2024 rural residential growth analysis, there was a request to expand hamlets from Mapleton in 2 areas, Wallenstein and Alma. Those were addressed. 2051 growth forecast, Mapleton requested more growth to the urban areas. This has been revisited and changed in your schedule, but that's not new numbers, that's just taking out of the rural and putting it back into the urban. So you're still using the same set of base numbers you had, it's just where they're allocated has been moved. Next committee is economic development. Discussed RideWell. The pilot for RideWell, if you're familiar with it, is a county ride-sharing service that completes in 2025. At this point, the county's revisiting this program to see how we can continue to support it. Mapleton itself has got a very low ridership. It's more geared to Center Wellington, a bit from North Wellington. What they changed, I guess it was last month or 2 months ago now, So they've zoned it, so before the cars were just going wherever, and now they've created zones where the cars need to stay in the zones as far as the pickup goes. So what that's done is it's restricted access in center Wellington, but it's improved access in North Wellington and Mapleton. So the book's out as to whether that's actually going to improve ridership from this area or not. But what it's done is it's made more car hours available locally than had previously been there, because before the other groups were taking it over and the ride sharing was bunching it up, and people from this area would call and just couldn't book anything. So hopefully we see some changes there. Excuse me. The County Welland Credit Review. This is a very interesting document. So in that, I've just gone through and pulled out some of the stats. So 2051 population for the county is projected at 160,000 people. Today, it's at 106. Okay. Average household incomes for last year, Mapleton Township was $130,416. County average was $145,100. Gross domestic product estimates based on income, Mapleton was $38,484 per capita. The county was $54,129. Demographics and households, Mapleton had a population of 11,480, projected to go to 15,100. Had 3,330 households, projected to go to 4,820. Again, those are the 2051 numbers. Wellington County currently has 106,320, going to 160. Currently, we have 37,750 households, and we're projecting 57,940. Again, 2051. This one I found really interesting. I read it twice to see what was, no, sorry, that's the next one. Getting ahead of myself here. Labor force by municipality. Mapleton had 6,359 people working, or 10.4% of the county workforce. The county itself had 61,213. This is the one I found interesting. So I don't know what your economic development people have been up to, but they get an attaboy or an attagirl, or depending on who runs that department. So for Mapleton, 2022 was showing 354 businesses. 2023, it was showing 467. For 2022, it was showing 1,641 employees. For 2023, it was showing 22,283, I'm sorry. So the total change was 113 businesses 1 year over the next, or 642 employees. So either we've really got up on our record keeping, or somebody's doing a great job in getting businesses going in Mapleton. But when I read those, I was like, because nobody else in the county even comes close to comparing to those percentages. So that's the stats, and again, that was in the last one. That was part of the economic development. We then moved on to AF&HR, which is Administration, Finance, Human Resources. They approved a non-union compensation review. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice here. So every 3 years we go out to a consultant, we have a review done, they do peer reviews, they do job description reviews. It's a fairly exhaustive process. And then the consultant comes back and says, okay, within grids, this is what you need to adjust here, there, and everywhere. So that was approved, and while we were at it, we also put in a 2.75%, sorry, increase for 2025. So that's what all county staff are going to receive next year. We approved a purchase of a citywide decision support module software, so that we've used Citywide for years. This particular module is set up to assist with the completion of the asset management plan. So that's a new module that we're buying. Okay, then we approved a new procedural bylaw. So this is something we don't do very often. This particular bylaw is regarding the election of the warden. Currently, we have 5 potential candidates running for warden. Nobody's officially declared yet, of course, because we don't do that till December the 6th, but we've had 5 people announce their intentions, and nobody's rescinded that yet. And our procedural bylaw didn't really cover that very well as to how you do it with multiple candidates. So they introduced a new bylaw that said specifically how they would do it in terms of dropping the lowest votes off of each round, and that at the end of the day, the warden still needs to get 9 votes to become a warden. So it's not, if somebody got 6 votes in the first vote, they become warden. It's down to the point that we actually get a majority of council to agree to the warden. Standard & Poor's rating was discussed. So Standard & Poor's, of course, is a credit rating. The County of Wellington enjoys a AAA credit rating, AAA stable, actually, which means it's not likely to change. We've had that since 2022. And it, of course, helps with our borrowing. We get lower costs and better service because of those ratings. So we're in good shape financially. And then we finished up reviewing the MPAC supplementary assessment. So the county budgets for that every year. Supplementary assessment comes in about 7 or 8 cycles from MPAC. Budget was $3 million. We're currently at $4.5 million in new assessment, and we still have 2 cycles to go. And the last cycle tends to be the heaviest because that's when they catch up on the commercial industrial. So assessment growth has been fantastic, which will help everybody out in their taxes, we hope. And the other thing that came out of that was reassessment that everybody's been sitting around waiting for, because we all know if you're involved in this business, we've been stuck with 2016 numbers for 8 years now. It's not expected till at least 2026. So nothing in the forecast for next year to release a new reassessment. If you follow the politics, 2026 could get you awfully close, if not into a provincial election, so I can suggest to you that 2026 likely isn't on the horizon either, but I don't have anything. That's just me speculating. So that's basically 477 pages in about 6 minutes. So I'd be happy to take any questions. I'm happy to come anytime you guys invite me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Earl. Questions for Councillor Campbell on his thorough report of last month's meeting? Councillor Ottens?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks for that. Personally, I would like to see like a quarterly report, but that's just me. I was wondering about a little elaboration on the automated speed enforcement. Does that mean someone speeds in front of school, then a camera is going to give them send a ticket in the mail? Is that how it works?
Yes, so basically what's going to happen, and the contract's still being negotiated, so the numbers aren't final yet, but take Mapleton, for example, with 4 locations. Each location is going to be hardwired and set up to accept a camera. That camera is going to have a tolerance on it, which has not been determined yet either, to the best of my knowledge. Greg is actually sitting on the, chairing this committee, so he would know better than I. But the intent is that if the camera is operating in that particular location, it will take pictures, it will record, and it will issue tickets / fines. It doesn't go against your demerit points, but there is a ticket. And it's based on a very strict tolerance, whatever they set it at. If they set it at 10 kilometers, there's a limit. If you're doing 11, you're going to get a ticket. Well, 11 over, I should say, right? The cautionary note on these devices is we're likely going to have approximately 30, I think, locations across the county. And we may have 10 cameras if we have that many. Okay, so you're going to have signage, you're going to have a box that somebody might want to vandalize, but it's not necessarily going to have a camera in it. So for Mapleton, for example, we'll likely say get a camera, and it'll rotate between the 4 locations. Okay.
I'm going to stop you there because we had a meeting today that.
Oh, there you go.
And apparently, that's what we thought we could do, but apparently
Right.
we can't do that anymore, is move the cameras around.
Oh, we can't?
Apparently not.
Oh.
Apparently, the provincial legislation in Ontario does not allow for that to happen. The committee meeting we had today, the initial startup, so for signage for the locations will go out in 2 weeks, at about October 15th, which is the 90-day period. You have to announce that you're going to put up cameras. The initial startup will be 7 cameras throughout the county, 1 per township. And Mapleton's location will be in front of the Drayton Heights Public School. That'll be the location that's been chosen. So the company, Global Traffic Group, they've analyzed all of our locations, and they picked the top ones that right now would be the highest speed zones. And every community is getting 1 sign or 1 camera. The cameras will be put in place Because there's a 90-day period, so the 90 days following will be sometime in January, the cameras will be up and running. Then the recommendation is that a few months after that, we implement more cameras after that. And after the one-year pilot, that's when it'll be pushed out to local municipalities to also participate on local roads. That's the update as of today. As for the thresholds, that's all done in closed session because we don't want the public to know what those thresholds are. And that will be coming to council again this month.
There you go.
So once that's established and fines go out, who is the recipient of that income? The township or the county?
The owner of the vehicle gets the ticket.
No, who gets the fine money?
Well, that all goes to the county, and that all gets, the money, the county's program, it goes to the county, and put right back in the system again. The company that's doing it for the county, of course, they have a fee, they have to cover their cameras and their maintenance and everything else, so all that goes right back into adding more systems later on. Other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Campbell. First off, thanks for coming out tonight. Appreciate your time and providing this update. Secondly, you mentioned a couple items kind of on the docket for 2025. Do you have a timeline for when county is engaging in budget discussions, or has that started already, or is that coming later this year?
We actually started the budget process in November, so committees will look at preliminary budgets in November as well as the 10-year capital forecast. Then we have a scheduled meeting end of the first week in January. I can't tell you the exact date, but we have a full day that we do only budget in January, and then it goes back to the committees at their January meetings, and then it's brought to county council at the last meeting in January. So
Any other questions? Councilor Reid, any questions? Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor, I just wanted to also say that I really appreciated you coming up for an update and kind of piggyback on Councillor Otten's, just to say I would also maybe appreciate them quarterly if we could, going forth.
The more the merrier. You got your invitation there, Earl. All right,
okay, thank you very much for your time.
thank you. I have a recommendation here that council was not in the list of recommendations, so I'll need a mover and a seconder. That Township Mapleton Council receive for information a delegation of Earl Campbell, County Councillor. Mover, please, Councilor Reid, second by, Councilor Martin, thank you. All in favor? That's carried, thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Item 8.1, the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes. Resolution here moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Reid, that Township Mapleton Council receive for information the draft minutes of the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting of September 5th, 2024. Council have any questions or comments on this report? All in favor? That's carried. Next up, we have the Economic Development Committee minutes. Have a resolution moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Ottens, that Township Mapleton Council receive for information the draft minutes of the Economic Development Committee meeting of August 12th, 2024. Any comments or questions on those minutes? All in favor? It's carried. Item number 9. Moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Reid, that Township Mapleton Council receive for information Building Department Report BD 2024-12, dated October 8th, 2024, regarding September month-end and year-to-date. Turn that over to Mr. Tin Schwartzentruber.
Thank you, Mayor Davidson. To the mayor and council, as you can see from our spreadsheet here, we issued 20 permits in the month of September with a construction value close to $5 million. It is lower than the 3-year average, but Year 2021, that was obviously a pretty substantial year for the township. In comparison to the last 2 years, we are above those averages. So we did have a pretty decent month of September.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for Tim? Councilor Martin?
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question. So the year-to-dates are obviously significantly lower than the last 3 years. Are you, as far as the overall department revenue, are you anticipating any shortfall as far as what the budget was for the 2024? We're still on track to cover?
Yes, because we're leaner in staff compared to those previous years, we should still have a healthy amount to put into the reserve fund this year. We are preparing for an additional hire at some point because of the projected housing starts that are going to be coming up, hopefully in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Further questions? Then I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you, Tim. Next, we have 9.21. This is a recommendation moved by Councilor Reid, second by Councilor Ottens, that Township Mapleton Council receive for information Clerk's Report CL 2024-13 regarding filling the council seat left vacant by Councilor Tamlin's resignation via appointment by call for applications, and that council adopt the specific procedures for filling the council seat as outlined by the clerk and for implementing council's chosen strategy. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing really to add above and beyond the written report, but staff is looking forward to starting the process. It's going to be very interesting. It's quite a compact process taking place over 7 weeks, and you'll have a new council.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Questions from members of council then on this process? Councilor Ottens?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just wondered, with the endorsement, when a prospective candidate needs 5 endorsement signatures, are we as council, current members, allowed to sign one of those, or is that something that's conflict?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, no, what you are allowed to, any eligible elector is allowed to.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Councilor Martin?
Sure, thank you. Question, comment maybe for the clerk. I do agree it's a compact and efficient and financially responsible option. The piece that kind of has me raising an eyebrow is the tie break and the drawing from a hat. Now, understanding that appointment by application, from existing councilors is not the most democratic way of filling this seat, but I understand the argument that you've made for filling it that way, and I agree with you. But a tie break coming from a hat seems even less democratic because we can blame the hat potentially. I'd rather take on that responsibility and accountability to the folks from Mapleton in another forum than drawing a name from a hat. Is there a way to accommodate that within the same compact, efficient kind of process, or is there another option we could potentially look at?
I share your sentiment through you, Mr. Mayor. I do share your sentiment, and I have a pile of paper on my desk where I've been through what everybody else is doing, checked it with the province. Can't say anybody has come up with a better system for that. I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. It's hard to imagine 4 candidates with 1 vote each. I suppose if we were to add a layer, it would be, councillors talking amongst themselves in open council about the pros and cons of each candidate and then re-voting. But this is really the precedent that's been set across the province, and try as I might, I couldn't come up with anything better than that.
Just Mr. Martin, Councilor Martin, this is at the county level as well, when they do the warden and chair positions. It's drawing out of a hat, same thing when it comes down to a tied vote. It's just, there's no other methodology that anybody's come up with that would, unless you just debate amongst each other, try to convince each other of someone else.
Thank you. I think Councillor Campbell had kind of indicated that there was maybe more of a runoff or a drop-off style, though, leading up to it.
So for county, what we just did, so it's sort of like ranked balloting. So the person that has the least votes gets dropped off. If there are two people with the least votes, say the two of the candidates both have 2 votes, then it's drawn, the name's drawn. And the one that the name's drawn goes on to the next round. So it's still set up that way. Further questions? Mr. Clerk, you got another comment?
The only other comment I have, and it's, I know it's obvious to Councillor Martin, it's just that even number of councillors, when in fact council's designed with 5 members to avoid that.
And certainly, Councillor Martin, I completely understand where you're coming from. I always thought the drawing out of the hat or drawing out of the box, whatever it was a strange way of deciding who gets to sit on, whether it be a committee or sit in the chair around council chambers. Any other questions? Comments? Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Just one final comment on it. The only good part about the drawing from a hat would be that the 2 remaining candidates have equal support from council, so that would be the good part of that.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Anything further from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. Moving on to the next item, 9.2.2. And this is the recommendation from Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Martin, that Township Mapleton Council receive information, the project development update from Graham Capital, and that council direct staff to negotiate an early works agreement with Graham Capital, which will supersede the current letter of intent, and for that draft early works agreement be presented to council for approval at a subsequent meeting. And today we have Graham Capital here. And go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I've met many of you, but not all of you, so I'll start with a quick introduction. My name's Sam Johnson. I'm the Director of Development with Graham Capital. I'm joined here today by 3 of my colleagues, Zion, Emily, and Tara, who have also been working closely with township staff on this initiative. A little bit of background on the project. We were engaged by the Township of Mapleton this summer to explore options for the community to look at accelerating the delivery of some very much needed community infrastructure related to water and wastewater system upgrades in Drayton and Moorfield, and look for an efficient way to finance those upgrades and construct them and get them into service so that that's not a constraint to community growth. As noted in the introduction provided, we've been doing an initial piece of work under a letter of intent, and this initial piece of work is what we're here to present the results of today. We call it our kind of validation phase analysis, or a feasibility study is a good way to think about this. Basically an initial piece of work for us to take a look at the Township of Mapleton's financial position, specifically related to utility infrastructure, as well as the planned scope of capital works that you've got over the coming years and decade here, and really investigate to see whether or not there is a cost-effective and practical way to finance and deliver that infrastructure in a bundled manner. I'll kind of start with a positive update for everybody, which is I think the results of the validation phase analysis are really positive. We're coming in slightly better than what we had initially envisioned and projected at the request for proposals phase for this opportunity, which is great. I think I'll just get that on the table. It's a good news story today. I do think that there is a good path forward here for our team to continue working in partnership with township staff to make sure that we can get this infrastructure financed and delivered for you. So that's what this update is all about. It's kind of a pretty thick pack of information, so I think to just make it efficient, we're going to run through the presentation fairly quickly. If you could page one slide forward. I'm actually going to have my colleague Emily, who's one of our development managers assigned to this initiative, provide a little bit of a background on the project scope of work and delivery structure that we're going to talk about. I think that's really important just to kind of level set everybody on, you know, specifically which capital works are we talking about addressing here and how are we envisioning this program taking place. I'll then return and kind of finish us off with some discussion about really what we've been doing through this validation, capital cost estimates, what this means for ratepayers, which I know is obviously top of everybody's mind for something like this, and then just some kind of conclusions, recommendations, and next steps. Okay, so feel free to chime in and ask questions whenever you'd like, or save them for the end because we might answer them at some point through the presentation. But with that, I'll queue up Emily and be back in 10 minutes.
Oh, you're a lot taller than me. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I just want to run through the project background quickly just to make sure we're all on the same page before we kind of dive into all the details. So if you go to the next slide. So we know we're all here because there's lots of growth in the township, so there's a need to upgrade the water wastewater infrastructure. And the RFP that was put out that we responded to basically asked us to bundle the projects for efficient delivery. Next slide. So I'm going to refer to a series of projects a couple times as we go here, so just so everybody's clear, I'm going to define what that series is first, so as I keep referring to it, you know what I'm talking about. So basically, the first three projects on this list are kind of the bigger ones, the high dollar value ones that we've really taken a deep dive into to make sure we get a good estimate on them. Then the last one is a list of a few smaller dollar value projects that are still planned for that kind of 2025, 2027 range that we've also included in this bundle, again, for efficiency. So the first one is pump house and standpipe upgrades to the Moorfield water treatment system. Then we're going to decommission the Drayton sewage pumping station and build a new one. And then we're going to expand the wastewater treatment facility. So those are the three big ones. And then the littler ones are just some linear upgrades, a clean out of one of the cells at the wastewater treatment facility. And we're going to work a little bit on the Moorfield sewage pumping station as well. So that's the bundle of projects we're looking at. Next slide. So before we came along, you obviously already hired SEMA and Aqua, so you had design covered and you had operations and maintenance covered, so really the only thing to cover off was financing and actual construction of the projects. So that's kind of where Graham fits in. So we've got our team here, which is our finance and development team, and then we've got Tara, who's part of our construction team, so we kind of bring that full suite of expertise here. Next slide, sorry. So when we approach a series of projects like this, we kind of break it down into some phases just to kind of make it more digestible, have some phases for everybody to understand. So phase one that Sam talked about is this validation phase that we went through already. So essentially, this is just making sure that the project makes sense for both of us to proceed before we go investing a whole bunch of money into it. So that's what we're here to present to you today. If we proceed, we would then follow that by a development phase, which basically just means that we're going to actually go talk to lenders, negotiate terms, bring in the financing for the project. We would also draft all the legal agreements to create a delivery structure, which I'm going to go through in the next section. And we would advance design to a point where we can actually fix construction pricing and construct the project on a fixed price lump sum contract. So that's the development in a nutshell. Then we would go on to deliver the project, so actually go build it. And then we have phase 6, which is long-term management. And that's basically just us being involved throughout the financing term as needed until all the repayments are made. So as you can see, we've broken it down into the financial, technical, and legal work streams because there's lots going on at the same time, and it all has to run in tandem to be very efficient. And that's what we would be here to manage for you. Next slide, please. So like I said, collaboration is key on a project like this. Although SEMA and Aqua were already here, that doesn't mean that we're not all working together. We would work very closely actually throughout, especially as we develop the design for this project. So involving Aqua in the design is fantastic because we can actually build in long-term efficiencies to the infrastructure in the design itself before we start building it. Having Tara's team, she can look at the design for constructability, value engineering, and she can also go get real-time pricing from key subs and suppliers. So the idea here is to really de-risk the project before we even build it, so that when we're ready to build, we know that it's hopefully going to be as seamless as possible. And that's why we need all this collaboration. That also leads to really effective financing terms for everybody, making the project actually more efficient. Also, feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have questions, please. Next slide. So I just want to give you an update on the technical, financial, and legal work streams of basically where we are now, which is the end of phase 1. So on the technical side, SEMA has progressed the design to 30%, so we're already quite a bit of the ways down the road here. And then our infrastructure team has developed an estimate and a schedule for that 30% design. Now, I want to just mention that that's still early. There's still lots of room to go in the design here. So we try and take a really conservative approach to the estimate at this stage, because what we want to present you with today is an expectation that we can either meet or improve on. So for example, there's opportunities in the design where we think we can save money. We haven't quite accounted for that yet. We still have a bit of a buffer in our estimate. There's also some risks that we've included a buffer for. Perhaps we mitigate those risks and we actually save some money. But today we're here to present you basically the most conservative case. On the financing side, basically we've taken those estimating inputs and put them into our financial model to figure out the financial structure that makes the most sense for this project. I won't dive too much into that because that's what Sam's going to cover after me here. And on the legal side, in the next couple of slides, I'm going to walk you through the delivery structure just at a high level so that you understand how the delivery structure plays very closely into the financing structure. So in putting all this together, basically we've concluded that this project is feasible and it does make sense. This doesn't always happen. It's not always a good news story, so we're very happy to present this to you today. Next slide. Okay, so the delivery structure, you can just go ahead to the next one. We've kind of categorized it in these two bubbles here. So the top one is the MSC structure, so Municipal Services Corporation. I know you're already familiar with this term. That's what we would look to create, and basically all it's going to be is a carve-out of the existing water, wastewater liabilities, revenues, and assets. And we don't want to change too much. We just want to carve it out from the township. And the key point of doing this is so that all of the debt associated with the water, wastewater asset does not consolidate to the township balance sheet. Now, this MSC structure is wholly owned by Mapleton, governed by Mapleton. We're happy to advise, we're happy to help set it up, but this is yours. And it's yours in the long term as well, even once the project's over. The bubble below is the project co-structure, we call it. So the project company is something we would have to set up specifically for this series of projects that we want to develop, because that's where we're going to actually bring in the financing for these projects. So we would go into this project co-structure as a partner with Mapleton, equal decision-making authority, have you completely involved in the project from day one through all decisions. And that's really just built so that we can deliver this series of projects, and when it's over, Project Co kind of goes away and the MSC stays as is. Next slide. So like I said, we're setting up the MSC basically for the reasoning of having that debt off balance sheet to the township. Now, governance of the MSC is something that we would flush out in later stages as we proceed, because there's not exactly a set standard of rules of how to run the MSC. You just have to run it the way it makes the most sense for your township. So we would help to develop a business case that makes the most sense for you. So governance would be, you would have 100% of the voting shares. You're welcome to include us on the board of directors if you want, as an advisor, or SEMA or Aqua. But again, that would just be as advisors. You would have all the voting shares in the MSC. Township staff can pretty much remain status quo. You can basically keep everything as is. We don't want to make it more complicated than it has to be. And any time that they put into the water, wastewater assets, they could just essentially invoice to the MSC. Now, a key thing when setting up the MSC is setting it up just by itself doesn't automatically mean everything is off balance sheet. It has to follow GBE rules, a government business enterprise. So essentially that means it has to be a self-sustaining entity. So all the revenues have to cover all the liabilities. That's really just for the operating liabilities. For capital works, we can actually inject some money from the township, so grant funding that you already have, we can inject that. Some development fees that may come in the future, we can inject that. Anything we can inject in that project company to make the project more affordable, that's what we want to do. But for the most part, the general day-to-day operations, all the revenues have to cover the liabilities. This is why we have to review the rate structure. So that's the MSC. Next slide. Sorry, I think we're going backwards. All good. So then we'd set up the project company. Again, like I said, this is just established so that we can bring the financing in for this specific series of projects. Now, any surpluses that remain at the project company. So like I said, we're giving you a conservative approach with the estimate. At the end of the day, if there's some money left over in that project company, that money would actually feed back into the MSC to use as you will. Keep it for reserves, feed it even up to the township. The idea is that the project co only uses the money it actually needs. Any surpluses remain with you, and that's kind of the beauty of this partnership approach. Next slide. And then under the partnership, we just have Graham Capital doing the advisory services. So like I said, all this kind of financial, legal work, coordinating everybody together to make this project happen. And then, next slide, we would have the construction team also under project company, under a fixed price lump sum contract. So that's kind of the gist of the structure. I know I kind of raced through that a little bit, so if you have any questions, open to it. If you go to the next slide, I'll just kind of summarize. Basically, what this allows us to do is to deliver this project now. You don't have to wait for the government to give you grant funding. You don't have to wait to build up reserves. You can get the financing in at very good rates because of the structure that we've developed. And you can do that all while retaining control and ownership over your asset. So with that, I will pass it on to Sam, and he can get into some of the numbers.
Thank you, Emily. That old saying, 1,000 ways to skin a cat. I guess the first two sections of that presentation, section 1 is the cat we're trying to skin, and section 2 is how we want to skin that. And really important to kind of level set everybody's understanding there, because how we structure this has a very material impact on how we can then go and finance and deliver the infrastructure. Okay, so at this stage of the game, I'd just like to kind of talk everybody through kind of how we've gone about this analysis and what the results are, which is really what we want to talk about here today. Probably the biggest input in a project financing structure like this is the capital cost of the work program. Okay, so in order for us to stand here today and kind of confidently tell you guys and girls what we think it will take to kind of like do this project under a finance basis and bundle this infrastructure for delivery, we do need to have a pretty confident and market tested estimate for the capital works. So that has been much of the effort by our team over the last few months as we've been working alongside township staff and the consultants engaged on this project. As Emily noted, the design's at about 30% completion. What that means is that we've actually taken that design, although it is at an early stage, and gone and market tested that to get current pricing information from subcontractors, from suppliers, just making sure that we've got the current state of the construction industry basically baked into that pricing right now, so that we know what that price is with a relatively high degree of confidence. There are still some assumptions to go along with that. We've got a register of those. We've got some risks and opportunities identified. As we continue working through this process, the number gets tighter as the design gets more advanced, of course, and the list of assumptions hopefully decreases and the opportunities get realized and the risks get mitigated. But if you want to flip slide, I'll just point at you when I need a slide flip, if that's okay. So all that to say, we have gone and done a pretty robust estimating exercise, again, to make sure that this is reflective of current market conditions. And the results of that estimate exercise are presented on screen here. Again, this is not like committed pricing or anything at this point in time. This is what we think this program of work is going to cost the township if they implement it within the 2025 to 2027 construction window, which is really what we're planning on doing here. Okay. The first project, the Moorfield Pump House and Standpipe upgrades, is coming in at about $6.5 million, give or take. The second project, which is the Drayton Sewage Pumping Station upgrades, is coming in just shy of $13 million. And the wastewater treatment plant expansion to 1,300 cubic meters a day is coming in at around $18.5 million. Emily also noted that there's kind of a series of projects within Mapleton's capital plan that are scheduled for completion in this window. Those total around $3.5 million if we bundle those and include it with the rest of this infrastructure. So all in all, the total CapEx pricing for this is just shy of $41.5 million. Two important notes on there. Again, because we're at an early stage of design, this does include a contingency figure of around 30%, which is just responsible reporting at this stage of the game. Okay, but that does represent money that is held to manage as the design is progressed, and ideally opportunity to kind of bring some of that CapEx down as we work through that design. And this number is subject to significant further refinement as we kind of work through 60%, 90% design and ultimately get into the ground. But it is what I would call a conservative estimate for the project to make sure that we're confident in the numbers that we can present with respect to overall financial impacts. That is the biggest kind of figure that goes into a financial model for a project like this. There's also a couple of kind of fundamental pieces of financing strategy that I just want to make sure are clear. And this is all consistent with the proposal we had provided originally as well. We want to make sure that the Township of Mapleton is benefiting from the most efficient capital structure possible. So what that means is we minimize equity, we minimize private sector equity returns, and finance as much as this project as we can through investment-grade debt, which is the cheapest way to finance a project. We also want to maximally utilize the grant funds that are either secured or being applied for in order to reduce the overall financing amount for this program of work. And that's kind of two pillars. The other strategy we're taking here has a little bit to do with the reserve fund build-ups and the use of development charges, okay? And so we've got a couple of graphs later that explain this a little bit better than I will verbally, but basically you have a reserve fund right now. You've been doing a good job in running your utility in the black for a number of years. That's a really strong tool for the township to be able to use to make sure that you don't need to have rate shocks for consumers if you're implementing a large capital program. Similarly, the development charges that you are projecting to receive through the DC study that the township has serve as another lever, so to speak, that we can pull to kind of reduce the immediate impacts of needing to finance a big infrastructure program and make sure that that is phased in gradually over time to reduce any rate shocks or spikes to the end user and consumer. And although I did say the CapEx is the most significant input to a financial model or strategy for something like this, there's a lot of other things that we've validated through this 3-month process with a lot of help from township staff. So, thanks specifically to Patrick and Jamie for entertaining many phone calls over the last few months. We've gone through and kind of made sure we've got a really good handle on, billings, revenue generation, operating costs, current surpluses or deficit situations, current state of the reserve funds and renewal costs, rate structures, development levies, things like that. Basically, how's the utility running right now? And next slide, please. That's kind of the steady state review. And then on the future state review, we've obviously taken a very hard look at the CapEx, but also looked at other costs associated with setting a structure like this up, pre-construction costs and things like that, grant funding assumptions for, funds that are either in hand already or being applied for, and then some specific financial points, which we've included just for full transparency around things like assumed interest rates, coverage ratios, gearing, how we're treating long-term and short-term debt. Again, all that is directly related to the structure that we're kind of developing a financial model for. So it all works together with to provide you with a pretty consolidated plan for how we would intend to go about things here. And the results of our analysis over the last few months that we've conducted in partnership with the township give us a base case that if you do want to go ahead and package up $41.5 million worth of infrastructure to deliver it as a bundle and remove that constraint to community growth, what that means in practice is that you'll need to implement a rate increase of about 3% per year for your utilities over a period of 12 years. That figure does include a 2% annual inflation rider baked into it as well. So that's, again, just good budgeting for financial modeling. You do have a base level of costs for operations of the utility system as it stands, and so the figures presented on screen do include a 2% annual uptick surcharge to cover off the inflation to the existing base, okay? That 3% is our base case. We've also, for transparency, run an additional case which assumes that grant funding for the wastewater treatment plant falls through. We hope that doesn't happen, and there is a figure of, I believe, $7 million in assumed grant funding for that large project baked into there currently. If that grant funding does not come through, the kind of annual capital charge would increase accordingly, and the magnitude of rate increase would be 5.5% 4% per year instead of 3% per year. When I told you this was a good news story relative to our base case kind of starting point with the proposal, when we did a very high-level analysis when responding to the RFP, we had expected these figures to be in the range of 5 to 7%. So I'd say what we've seen is kind of upward pressure on CapEx throughout the construction industry right now. That's something happening to the bad, obviously, but to the good. I think we've kind of validated a lot of really good structural points that we can, rely upon to get very good, efficient financing structured for the township. And the net result of all that is, base case of 3 points, worst case of 5.5, and probably somewhere in the middle of that range, depending on where things come in. Graphically, when I talked a little bit about use of reserve funds and development charges, I think these two figures do a better job explaining that than I can. So, I think it's important for us in formulating this strategy, and I understand probably important to the township, that we're avoiding any massive spikes or kind of single, double-digit adjustments to rates or anything like that. And so what we're proposing and kind of modeling out in the financial model that we've shared with township staff is that any rate increase required would be kind of consistently capped at the lowest possible level over time, and the reserve fund would be basically used as a tool to enable the township to do that. So if you kind of look at the chart to the right, you see if you start preparing for this now by trickling your rates up a little bit so that you can eventually get to the level that supports the cost of this new infrastructure, you can build a pretty healthy buffer in that reserve fund before financing repayments come online, and then draw that down a little bit before building a really healthy reserve balance again. So again, you are in a fairly good financial position right now, in my opinion, and that gives us kind of an additional lever to pull to make sure that, although it is a very large program of capital works for a community this size, I think it is possible to implement it without having any requirement for kind of like massive one-time spikes or anything. And I know Emily made the point already, but the structure that we're basing this analysis on is not a privatization structure, and I want to make that point very clear. The MSC is kind of the way I think about it, is a tool that the township can use to put yourself in a long-term, economically sustainable utilities pay for utilities structure. As it is not a privatization style structure, there is no back-ended repayment or anything like that required for a large upfront equity investment, because again, that doesn't really exist in the type of structure that we're talking about here. It's primarily debt financed. So that is kind of where we landed. And I'll summarize and just provide some next steps, because I know that's a lot of information. Really just 4-point summary. We do think that there is a good way to bundle all this enabling infrastructure for the community, for the township of Mapleton, and get these important projects delivered between 2025 and 2027. That's kind of the overarching objective we were testing through this validation phase. I do think that the MSC GBE structure, based on what we've looked at, is the most cost-effective way to go about that for the township. Provides some structural benefits related to, maintaining future financial capacity beyond wastewater and water utilities for the township. And like I say, our preliminary analysis does really confirm feasibility here. We're, as I stated, coming in slightly below the expectation that I had when we started this exercise, based on some very high-level analysis we did at proposal time. And that kind of wraps us up in the validation phase. So that's kind of the conclusion of our work under this letter of intent. And if you want to flip one more slide for our last slide that I'll go over. Next steps, which is basically if the township wishes to continue with this project, like if you do agree that this is if it's still a priority for the community to finance and deliver this infrastructure, and this structure and analysis seems like it will work for you, we would look to execute an early works agreement, which would take us through to, basically close of the development of these projects and construction, continue design progression alongside your existing consultants for, design work and operations and maintenance, supplemented by our construction team, of course. Actually refine this financial structuring, engage with lenders, get that set, and implement the legal structure as well. So, that's kind of where we're at with next steps outlined, and that's all I have to present. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have. I know it's a lot of information, but hopefully most of it's digestible. So
Thanks, Sam. Questions from members of council then? Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting and fun to actually be at this stage. We kind of went down this road a few years ago with this, kind of P3 concept. The information's fantastic. It was well laid out. The question I have is around the grant funding. So it's what, roughly 70% of really the project cost if we're looking at $7 million. The application for the grant, and this might be more of a Manny question, Sam, but does that come strictly from the township? Is Graham involved in that application process? Is it a SEMA thing? What does that look like from an organization and submission process?
Thank you. Through your worship, normally with the help of Graham and the help of SEMA, we gather information, and we've been in a habit lately, SEMA usually writes the grant applications, but there's a few. So the provincial applications SEMA has written. If you remember the Housing Accelerator Fund application, which some of that money could go to wastewater, was written by Colliers. So, and then there's a few more now that we have Patrick on board that are coming up that we will do internally. So it's a mismatch of all. But normally it's written by the township, filled out by our consulting engineers.
Follow up?
Thank you. And there's one more quick one for me around the MSC. So I see with the, the preliminary timeline is early next year. That seems really aggressive for, I don't know how an MSC is exactly created, but does that MSC need to be in place like at a certain point in this project?
Yeah, great question. And short answer to it is I think you'd be best off having that MSC in place before breaking ground on kind of the program of work. So, there is a statutory process that needs to be followed to establish an MSC in the province of Ontario. Really what that entails is the development of a business plan and a business case for it, and a kind of a public advertising period, and some legal work to actually do the work to get that entity set up effectively. When we talk about groundbreaking in spring for the construction, I think that's really the milestone that I've got in, front of mind for me right now, because we're looking at a bunch of projects that I know the township wants to have delivered in the 2025, 2026 window. I think that it is possible to steward to that, with our team kind of driving that process with township support, as long as the township is, committed to the project and wants to make that decision. I do think the timeline would be aggressive but achievable is how I'd characterize it.
Other questions? Sam, when we look at this program, it's 40 years. And to some, that's pretty daunting. 40 years from now, no one in this room will probably be, none of us will be working here anymore 40 years from now, I wouldn't think. That's pretty daunting, but when you look at housing right now, they just changed that to 30 years for a lot less money. So when we looked at this a few years ago, I think we were looking at 25 years at the time. Is the 40 years now the new mark, or is this something that needs to be put in place to make this work?
Also a great question. I'll answer that, to the best of my ability. There is no fixed requirement for duration. That's the easiest way I can answer that. You can structure financing with a 10-year repayment period, or you can structure it with, maybe 20 and 30 are probably a little bit more common to see, especially if a municipality is direct borrowing to pay for a piece of infrastructure. We've done 40-year financing before, so you're not the first that we're kind of looking at this tenor for. I would say the advantage of a longer term is that you get lower rate impacts phased in over a longer period of time. That's basically what it boils down to, simplistically, because you're kind of stretching the required repayments out over a longer period of time. So we can run, we have a fairly sophisticated financial model developed for this, which township staff has a copy of. We can look at, we can hold all the other inputs the same and structure it as 30-year debt. That's something we can do. There would be a financial impact to that, slightly changing some of the rate impacts over time, right? So I would say what I would recommend actually is that we just, run several cases during the next stage of this exercise and work with your staff to decide what's best for the community. You can go shorter. Shorter would have generally a little bit of a cost impact. But that's a simple analysis to do.
Thank you. So we're also looking at the 41.3 million is the project over this 40 years. Do you have, that's the cost of the project, but of course the financing. So what's the total cost to the township over that 40-year period with the interest and everything else?
I would need to look at the financial model that we've given to your staff to pull that number out of it. But I know Patrick has a copy of that model, so he's
Keep talking. He's
rapidly
trying to find
pulling
it.
that up, and I'll let him answer that, unless Zion knows it off the top of his head. No,
No.
he doesn't. There you go.
Well, while he's looking that up, I'll ask my next one then.
Sure.
So this 41 million is for stage one to get us at 1,300.
That's correct. The 41.3 million is for the 4 capital projects that Emily outlined in the presentation.
So during this 40-year period, we'd likely want to go to 1,800. So how do we factor that into this program?
What you'll need to do, like let's say in 10 or 15 years from now, there's another $50 million worth of work that you want to deliver. That will need another separate analysis to go along with that. I think there's grant funding streams that would need to be investigated for that. There's also probably a materially different rate base at that point in time if your community is growing in accordance with the projections of the DC study. So, you would be looking at borrowing more money at a future date. What the impact of that looks like would depend on, what grants are available, what the rate base is at the time, those other inputs. This addresses the infrastructure that we know about today.
Okay, thank you. Manny?
Through your worship, to that point, though, what we're doing as part of that 41 million is doing as much as possible to get us ready for that 1,800. So all the concrete work, and I guess you can talk to them about that, Tara, but we're preparing ourselves for that next step whenever that needs to happen. That pre-work will already be done, so that there's not that much not as much money needed to be invested to get us to that stage.
Before I go ahead, Patrick, do you have those numbers yet? Or, not yet. Okay, fine. We're not going to worry about it. Other questions from members of council then? Councillor Martin?
Maybe just a quick one, and it might not be fair, but MVBR, I know it's been something that kind of caught our eye a while back. Cold weather was kind of something that was a little bit of concern. I'm assuming that technology is something that SEMA has done as far as the design goes, but as from a Graham side, is that a technology that you guys have constructed before, happy with the results? Like I said, if it's not a fair question, tell me, but I'm just curious.
Always happy to answer an unfair question. That is, no, and it's a totally fair question. We are familiar with the technology. I'm kind of the development and finance guy at Graham, so I don't profess to be an expert on water and wastewater treatment technology. I can tell you that our water team, like our infrastructure team that builds these things, we're building an MBBR wastewater treatment facility for a community of about 15,000 people in Alberta right now. Definitely colder climate than what you experience right now. As part of this validation phase that we've gone through, we also arranged a tour of, which township was it? Kesselman. So some of, both Township, SEMA, and our staff visited Kesselman to take a look at the installation that they're doing there. So I never like firsts, and I know nobody likes firsts, and you wouldn't be the first to be doing an MBBR in kind of a cold weather climate for a community this size.
Thank you. And just following up on that again. So stage 1 is MBBR, stage 2 is MBR, if I remember correctly. So is our system initially going to be built so that MBR can just be dropped in instead of having to recreate everything again? Okay, he's got, Manny's shaking his head, yes, okay.
Through your worship, yeah, so that's exactly what I was talking about when we're future prepping the construction, the initial construction, so that we can easily swap out the technology, but do the things that are required to make it easy and less expensive for us in the future.
Perfect. Thank you. Other questions from council members then? Jamie wants to answer something, so he's sitting there. No, he's. If there's no other questions? Got one more for you then. If all the stars aligned and the government of Ontario says, hey, Mapleton, we're going to give you $40 million, how does this change this whole program?
That's a great question. It is. And what I would say is that, I said earlier a couple of times that I think you're in a good financial position right now. Like you are running your utility in the black currently. You've also asked a couple of questions about what happens with future expansion right now, right? Like what happens when you need to take it to 1,800 cubes a day and beyond in the future. If you had a large and unexpected injection of grant funding, I think what that would do is give you a whole lot of flexibility in terms of how you deliver that next stage of growth and how you can make this a really, really sustainable model for your community for decades to come, right? Like, I see that as a big positive if that were to happen. I don't think it would change my view of what's best for you today.
Thanks, Sam. That's a great answer for that one. Go ahead, Councilor Martin.
That trumped me as far as an unfair question goes, so.
Other questions for council? If not, anybody else need me to read the recommendation again? Are we good with it? Okay, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Sam and team.
Thank you very much. We'll speak out the back.
Yep, that's great. Next up is 9.3, Recreation Department, Mapleton Summer Camp Update. Amy?
Good evening, everyone. We had a great summer camp this year. Honestly, I truly believe it was one of our best. Our counselors this year are absolutely amazing, and the majority of our campers and counselors are returning, which is fantastic for so many reasons. So we're really excited. Next slide, please, Maggie. So here's some of our camp spotlights. I think it's important to showcase some of the youth that came out and were our camp counselors this year. Farah was new to us this year, but Mariska and Avery are both returning for their third year of summer camp with us. And actually, Mariska and Avery are also assisting us in our after-school program, so they're backfilling for us some supply staff, so that worked out great. Haley was new to us this year and is currently a co-op student and stayed with us through Norwell, and she is doing a placement in recreation and economic development here at the township office. So we're lucky to have her with us a few hours a day, which is fantastic. And Catherine is tried and true and has been with us since the very beginning and has been with us for all 4 years, which is fantastic. And we hope we will see them all back again next year. The biggest addition to camp this year, I believe, was our lunches. Our families and our parents were so excited about our Lunch Legends program, and our community groups were absolutely amazing and incredible in helping to make this happen. It was great. The kids were able to come every day and have a nutritious meal that helped keep them fueled throughout the day, which really assisted families, especially during this time of year when you have the increase in childcare costs and the cost of food and everything else is increasing and rising. This program really helped ensure that our children were fed a balanced meal every day, and we are so, so grateful to the community groups that helped us to make that happen. So our days are jam-packed full of fun, so we added the July and August calendar for you to see some of the things that were happening throughout camp, as well as our themes for each week and who the Lunch Legends were. You can go to the next slide, and there's August there for you. Thanks, Maggie. Next slide. Here's sort of what a day in the life looks like at camp. We run 2 pods depending on the amount of children that are in program. A majority of the day is spent outside, and that is what the day looks like with the extended care on both the beginning and the end of the day. So we prefer to bring our special guests to camp as opposed to taking our campers out on field trips. Part of the reason for this also is cost. It is costly to take the campers out, and we have some amazing opportunities to bring people to us. So people became very aware of Paige's face painting this year at numerous events throughout the community, as well as Maitland Conservation Area came in. Mapleton Fire came twice. I'm not sure who had more fun, whether it was the kids or the firefighters. When they came in August, it was so cold, and the kids still loved being sprayed with water, so that was fantastic. And we had the Ice Queen and a superhero visit us at Camp for Superhero Week as well. And here we are having some fun. Next slide. Next slide. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. The resolution I have here is moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Reid, that Township Mapleton Council receive for information and recreation report REC 2024-05 dated October 8th, 2024. Questions from council or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Ottens.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. The Lunch Legends program is great. It looks like it's all service clubs that I assume cover the cost. So who actually provides the food? Is it a local restaurant? Are we supporting a business that way too?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Ottens, we do the grocery shopping, and we make the food right in the kitchen at the hall there.
Excellent. Further questions? Thank you much. Looks like I had a great time this summer again, Amy. All in favor? It's carried. Next item up is fees and charges. Before we go into fees and charges, during our last council meeting on September 24th, we were discussing fees and charges, and I spoke about water and wastewater, especially the wastewater rates and percentages, and I incorrectly compared our home wastewater rate usage increase of 14 to 15% to the overall rate increase of on the report of 5.5%. What I should have stated was a reference of 11.7%, which was the wastewater rate increase number when I was making my comparison, not the overall 5.5% comparison or increase. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Patrick, you wanted to speak to this?
No, nothing further to add than that, Mayor. Appreciate you clarifying that. I do know there was some literature within the local newspaper that covered those comments, so I thank you for clarifying that tonight. 11.7 is on the wastewater consumption portion only. The overall bill, though, is a 5.5% adjustment based on the rates proposed, so thanks for clarifying that. Thank you.
Now, this is talking about our fees and charges, and I know Mary wanted to speak, or is it Ken? Ken, is it not your birthday today? Okay, well, happy birthday, Ken. Happy 50th birthday, Ken. I'm sorry we don't have any balloons or cake for you. I'm sure we can find a piece of pumpkin pie if you want a little bit later.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just appreciate being able to speak for a moment just about the fees and schedules. I was just looking at the proposed rate for the cemetery with regards to the columbarium. I had come to council last year when the original rates were set for the columbarium. It was based on cost recovery. When the increase was proposed last year, council was gracious enough to not increase it from that 1,500. I noticed that it has made it back on to be increased this year, and I just wondered what council's feeling on that was, as well with regards to last year's schedule for the cemetery. There was a phase-in increase. I know about 3 or 4 years ago, it was proposed to have a very large increase to the cemetery plots to get to a certain rate by in a rather quick manner, and then there was a rate index that was kind of going to be phased in over 10 years, and I noticed that the phase-in rate for an adult regular plot for this year is going to up to $13.75, but in the proposed phase-in index, it was at $13.45, and then incrementally going up from there for the next 10 years. So I just wondered about the columbarium itself, of being cost recovery at that $1,500 that was originally set, and just wondering about the fact of the phase-in index that was proposed and things. That was just my questions about the cemetery tonight.
Thank you, Ken. Patrick?
Sure. Thank you to Ken for the comments through you, Mayor. First of all, I guess we'll go with the columbarium niche's cost recovery perspective. I will outline that from looking at last year's budget, the 2024 budget, the cemeteries on whole were budgeted last year to operate at a net deficit of $65,000. That's quite rare in most municipalities to have that significant of a portion of funding for cemeteries to come from the tax base, but that's where the budget sits. So the efforts prior to my time to try and achieve cost recovery within this, I would fully support council or the previous council that decided to phase that in over a period of time. I think that's a way of being fair to the ratepayers. I would note a number of things. The cemetery does have capital costs within our long-term capital forecast that you saw as council last year of about $178,000. Looking at the financial statements from last year, the existing reserve fund balance for the cemetery is at $5,100, 5100. So obviously some work needs to be done from a rates perspective to build sufficient funding for the long-term capital needs of the cemeteries. So that's where I would sit as far as the rationale for the phased increases on the columbarium niches. To the second piece, I believe, was on the plots or lot sales, I guess, the adult lot sales, and your figures of 1345 versus the 1375 is there. To be clear, the phase-in period of internment rights was a phase-in period schedule plus consumer price index. So the reason that it's not at 1345 that it originally was is because the consumer price index is at 2.4%. That's what brought it to 1375. So Again, staff work to develop estimates to reach a state of cost recovery, or our best efforts to do so. That's what's before you in the bylaw, and we'd still stand behind that. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Further comments?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I understand where you're coming from with regards of wanting to be cost-effective, certainly, and recovery in the cemetery. With regards to other municipalities, I'm sure they're in the very similar kind of situation. You know, cemeteries are certainly not ones that are necessarily profitable or cost 100% cost recovery. But I will let you know that, neighboring Minto Township, as soon as they set their price for their columbarium, they have left it at that. Same with two of the privately owned cemeteries here in the municipality of Bethesda Cemetery as well as Dariad. Once they put in a new columbarium, the new one cost them more, so those were at a different rate. And I do know that with regards to the reserves, there was a large reserve that was all used for installing that columbarium, which we certainly understand that you want to be able to have some reserves in there. But most of the people that are going into that cemetery, as I've said to council previously, are also those people that have been taxpayers in the community for a number of years, and also have helped fund other areas in the municipality, such as arena and parks and rec and so on and so forth, which I believe, I don't think that are 100% cost recovery as well. So I just put that out to council and to you through the mayor, but I appreciate having a time to speak this evening.
Thank you, Ken. Questions from members of council? Or further comments? Go ahead, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I saw this was on the agenda for last meeting when I wasn't here. I'm not sure what you guys just discussed exactly, but, and this is, you guys may need to remind me about the conversations we had last year, but I was under the impression that we were going to be addressing the opening and like the interment charges moving forward, and maybe not the actual interment rights. Sorry if I got the terms wrong. That the rights may not change, that we would focus more on the interment charges. But I would rely on you guys to maybe, my memory's good, but it's not very long, about what our plan was to move forward.
Yeah, good question. I know the report we got last month, it was stated that interment as per phase-in schedule plus CPI was what, and that's what Patrick just spoke about just now. That was on our schedule last meeting as well. Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think where Councillor Martin is coming from is that if it was on the wages end of, say, charging maybe a little bit more for the opening and closing, that's money that you can use right away. Part of that interment purchase price, part of that goes into a care and maintenance fund, which you can't really use the care and maintenance fund other than for just small maintenance issues and stuff like that. So again, I think that was part of our discussion, was maybe instead of changing that rate of sale price, that maybe you creep up the opening and closing a little bit, which would be money that would be able to be used more directly and easier for the municipality to be better cost recovery.
Thanks, Ken. I do remember talking about a phase-in, and I just couldn't remember what we ended up deciding on the phase-in last time. But this report, or sorry, the report that we had last council meeting was interment as per phase-in the schedule. So I'm assuming that staff got that from our direction that we gave them before. Mr. Mayor, do you remember this at all?
So much like Councilor Martin, my memory is good, but not great, and I'd have to really take a little bit more time to go back and see, but it sounds like you basically described it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I guess I would just reiterate the status of the finances within the cemetery reserves right now, the timeline on future investments at that cemetery, the need for funding within there. If we're currently operating at a significant deficit, I think maybe I'd point to the long-term financial strategy and plan of the town and the key aspect of sustainability that isn't in line with sustainability practices, I'll say that, to continue operating at a deficit level if we're going to reach sustainability of that service offering within the township. Ultimately, it's the decision of council how to move forward. It's just going to make that job much more difficult to reach sustainability or a level that's more appropriate cost recovery if we're not putting in annual adjustments.
I'm just going to ask council, just to get this clarified, would council want to postpone this to the next council meeting so we can get clarification on this piece? Because we want to make sure we get this right. We want to make sure that if we made a decision that it's coming across correctly. Go ahead, Councilor Reid.
Through you, Mayor, I agree with you that maybe looking back at this and what we discussed in our minutes from that time would be prudent for us to do, because if we did state that as what we were doing, I wouldn't want to go against something we had already decided.
Councilor Martin, you were wanting to go?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Patrick's advice is sage, and it's exactly what we want coming out of that chair, so thank you. The columbarium specifically, so when we talked about interment in the report last week, it's just not clear to me whether we talked about the rights or the charges, I guess, and what our cost recovery was intended, whether rights and charges are both included in that, or whether it's just the opening and closing portion. Like, we're not going to make up a $65,000 deficit in columbarium charges. I mean, I hope not. We better not. Sorry, but like that's the columbarium itself. I think there is an argument maybe to just simply address opening and closings moving forward, inflationary increases. But we are in the red, obviously, and I think we probably expect to be there for a period of time. I think that it's reasonable as far as taxpayers go, and it's a service we provide. We certainly run other services at a much higher deficit, but cost recovery is the goal. I'm just not sure what the end goal of what, to be revenue neutral at the end of a year by 2031, or what our strategy, I guess, is long-term.
Thank you. Anything further from council? I do have the recommendation here. I'll read the recommendation so council knows what the rec was here. Moved by Councilor Reid, second by Councilor Martin, that bylaw number 2024-048 being a bylaw to establish the fees and charges for various services provided by the municipality, and repeal bylaw number 2024-016 and any amendments thereto, be hereby read first, second, and third time and finally passed this 8th day of October 2024. That is our resolution motion on the floor. Any further comments and questions then? Councilor Reid.
Through you, Mayor, I think I'd like to see that delayed until we can, or maybe reworded so that the columbarium niche stays at a cost recovery, and that we continue to do the interment charges at the rates that we've been suggested.
You're going to clarify that at me again, so let's do that again.
Sorry.
Okay.
Keeping the columbarium niche at cost recovery at the 1,500, as we had stated a year ago, and having the increases still occurring on the interment charges, but not in the actual niche that we're trying to do the cost recovery on. So leaving the 1,500 the same way as it was, not increasing it to 1,535.
Okay. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, can I just suggest that there be something noted within that, that we'll revisit that as part of next year's review of fees and charges, that it's not open-ended forever, or if the intent here is that forever the charge of a niche is $1,500, make that very clear. But I just need to know whether we're coming back next year, fees and charges by law, time period, and recommending an adjustment, or if it's just staying as is for the, I don't know, forever.
Thank you. Councilor Martin?
I think this might be cleanest, Mr. Mayor, if we just maybe postpone this until the next meeting. If it's going to be a January 1 start date anyway, for these fees and charges. I know we don't want to keep pushing stuff too far back into the fall, but that way we can maybe get clarity on what our plan is around, what do we call it? Not cost recovery, but the phase-in part and what it's going to be. And then maybe just have something more succinct, if that's fair.
So Councilor Martin, you're putting a motion on the floor to postpone until the next council meeting? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to comment that the budget that we're preparing to bring forward and table at the next council meeting is based upon all of the other rate adjustments that are in the fees and charges bylaw. So from a staff perspective, the preference would be that what was raised by Councillor Reid, that the one charge would remain where it is. The rest would all be approved. I prefer that, because then we don't have to rework a lot of budget estimates that we've been preparing to this point.
So Councilor Martin, I just had to ask this question, motion or no motion at this point?
I'll withdraw it then, and
Thank
let's
you.
address Councillor Reid.
So Councilor Reid, your motion is to have the fees and charges to stay at $1,500 until they're all sold? Is that what your motion is? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, but I'd also want to understand what that, I mean, obviously, we don't know what that timeline is, because that's not something we can predict. But do we know what that looks like? Do we set a couple years timeline to revisit it? That's something I'd like to hear more information about, maybe.
Okay. Before we go ahead, so that's your motion. I need someone to second that, if that's her motion on the floor. Do we have are we clear what the motion would be?
For me, keeping the columbarium niche at the $1,500 and not increasing it, but I would like to probably, like Patrick said, have a stipulation to maybe keeping it that way for 2 years and revisiting.
So are you suggesting not even changing it for CPI every year, just leaving it standard?
I think when our last conversation we had even a year ago, that we didn't do the CPI increase on the columbarium niches. We kept them cost neutral.
Mr. Barron?
I think I can probably try to shed some light into this. $1,500 until we build the next columbarium, and then there will be a cost, because the argument is that it's been paid for. There's no maintenance or extra costs. And if we kind of word it that way, then to Patrick's point, everything else can be dealt with, except that $1,500 can remain until the next columbarium is built. Just a suggestion.
Councilor Reid?
I would agree with that, putting that in as part of my motion would be okay with what I was suggesting.
Okay, seconder for that motion? Councilor Martin? All right, so any discussion, further discussion on that motion? Okay, all in favor of, go ahead.
I just had one question about the niches. How many are there in that columbarium? Is it 85? 60, okay. That actually, the math works way better on that. Thank you. I was thinking 85.
So we have a motion to amend on the table, to amend the columbarium niche to $1,500 and that not to change until the next one's built. Okay? And that's Councilor Reid, seconded by Councilor Martin. All in favor of that? That's carried. All right. Mr. Kelly, anything else you need for that, for your purposes? Okay? Not yet, we're going to do that next. Okay, just want to make sure that you got what you needed. Mr. Thompson, anything further? Okay, thank you. So I'll read this again, council, that can move by Councilor Reid, second by Councilor Martin, that bylaw number 2024-048 being a bylaw to establish the fees and charges for various services provided by the municipality, and repeal bylaw number 2024-016, and then any amendments thereto, be hereby read a first, second, and third time, and finally pass the 8th day of October 2024. Any further comments or questions then? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving down to item number 12. We have a few items there for council's information. Any comments on any of those 5? Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question, obviously, because I wasn't here last meeting, but I did see that some discussion at this, I guess I could go back and watch it and answer my own question, but what conversations did we have around renewable energy projects that prompted this letter from MPP Ray? I'm just curious.
So we had conversations, of course, the newspaper picked it up, MPP Ray saw it in the newspaper, and he sent a letter in comment on the provincial side of things to us. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I was a little confused by the letter, I got to be honest, around wind turbines, or not specifically, but I believe that was kind of the genesis of, so are you, like, I do read English, but are you able to, like, articulate what the provincial position is? Because it did seem to kind of have 2 different positions within the letter.
From how I read the letter is that the province is not telling us what we need to do, but it's open if we want to participate in this kind of discussion and open it up for the municipality, but it's no direction from the province saying that we have to do it. That's what I'm understanding from the letter from Mr. Ray. Further questions, comments on any of these 5? Councilor Reid, you were kind of going for one, so.
Sorry, it was just in regards to the same letter from Matthew Ray, our MPP there. Since talking about wind turbines at our last meeting and doing some of my own research, obviously, I did see a lot of articles that are showing that Doug Ford and his government is shifting the direction on wind power, so I found this a little bit confusing. And I just maybe, it'd be good to have some more clarification as to, like, I know this letter's here and it says there's no provincial mandate, but that's not what's being told to us otherwise as well.
Now we're going to play with what Doug Ford says and what everything else comes along. I just read the same letter that you did, and the take I get from it is that, yes, the province is open for it, but it's not being mandated or pushed down to municipalities to actually do it. That's what I'm understanding from it, and we can check with Mr. Ray tomorrow when I see him tomorrow morning. Anything further on these 5? If not, we'll move on to item number 13. There is a notice of motion here that Councilor Reid has put forward that will come to the next council meeting. We have a notice provision here about the fees and charges, which was in the newspaper. Number 15, other business. Do we have other business to discuss? Not seeing any. We'll move in for a closed session then. Moved by Councilor Martin, second by Councilor Reid, that Township of Mapleton Council move into a closed session to consider the following subject matter: the security of the property of the municipality. All in favor? We'll take a 5-minute recess.